Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are once again taking a look at my picks for the week 3 matches for the Overwatch League. So, there are 7 matches this weekend, a little weird number that I think is kind of bizarre, but that's what we have. So we're going to take a look at all of the matches. The first thing I want to talk about, though, before we get into any of that, is I would like to just quickly mention something I've already talked about a little bit, but of course the cancellation of all the matches in Seoul and the fact that they're moving the matches back, presumably to the U.S. I don't know what exactly their plan is, but all the teams have traveled to the U.S. from everything I can see. So, to me, that is the most likely thing that's going on. So, it's unfortunate. We're going to have to wait a little longer for a lot of these teams to play, but I'm hoping we learn something soon. Like I said, I've already talked about this a little bit in other places, so I don't want to touch on it too much here. But it is something that I'm paying attention to, and of course, I'll follow and I'll talk about as we find out when those matches are taking place, and I will adjust my video making schedule accordingly. But with that out of the way, let's take a look now at the matches that will be taking place this weekend in Houston. So here is a look at my picks. As you can see, there's 3 games on Saturday, 4 games on Sunday. Let's start by going to the first match on Saturday. The New York Excelsior taking on the Florida Mayhem. This is an interesting match. Obviously, New York went 1-1 last week. They did not look that great against Philadelphia. They dominated Houston, but Houston is probably the worst team in the league right now, so it's not that surprising to have a team like New York dominate them. Florida is another team that's very interesting. This is a match that I would have thought would have been closer based on what we saw the first day of matches. But after Florida's performance against Philly, they are completely steamrolled. I don't really know what Florida is. I think Florida's still pretty good. But overall, I would say that New York is still the better team, and I would say that the chances are much higher that New York has the ability to put it all together than Florida does. But I don't think Florida's necessarily a bad team. I don't think this is like the previous Florida Mayhem where it was, anytime they played a really good team, it was kind of a steamroll. I legitimately could see the Florida Mayhem winning this match. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I just don't see it happening in this instance because I have too much faith in what New York has done and what they've been so far. But we'll see what happens. But I'm picking New York for this one. The next match is the Toronto Defiant versus the Atlanta Reign. The Atlanta Reign are finally back. They're finally playing a match. You know my feelings on the Atlanta Reign. I think they're one of the strongest teams in the league in general. I think they're really, really good. And as much as I think the Toronto Defiant are a pretty good team as well, we saw what they did against the Fusion. They played very well. I think the Reign will win this match. They've had 3 weeks more than these other teams. In some instances, I guess it was just 2 weeks more, whatnot. They haven't had many weeks as some of these Pacific teams. But the Atlanta Reign have had 3 weeks basically to watch every team that's playing and kind of get the idea of what they're doing. I think they have one of the best rosters in the league for 2020. I'm really confident in what the Atlanta Reign have done with their team. The team they've put together, I think, is really, really good. And I'm interested in seeing what they do against the Toronto Defiant, a team who I've actually been impressed with so far. I think the Atlanta Reign are a really solid team, and I think they're going to have a really good first appearance. But I'm excited to finally have every team in the Atlantic have a match played. so that I can really kind of figure out where everything lies. So I mentioned last week or on Monday that I was going to talk about the standings this week. I'm going to wait until Monday to talk about the standings for the Atlantic Conference, because then we'll have Atlanta and I can kind of get a better idea of what some of these teams are after 4 weeks. I think it'll be easier to see. Without the Pacific Conference standings, it's a little more interesting just to look at one conference's standings. So I've been kind of trying to avoid it. But this is a match that I really like, this Atlanta Reign Toronto Defiant match. I think the Defiant have done a lot of good things. I think they've looked solid. But the Reign, I think, have just such a good roster. And I've got a lot of faith in them that I'm picking them for this one. Final match on Saturday is the London Spitfire taking on the Houston Outlaws. I am picking the Spitfire. We saw them beat the Justice last week. And I think if they can beat the Justice, they can definitely beat the Outlaws, because I don't think the Outlaws are that good. So I think this should be a pretty easy match for the Spitfire. I don't think they really have a super difficult task ahead of them going up against the team that is not that great in Houston Outlaws. I think that the Houston Outlaws are having a lot of issues with health. I mean, we've seen that they have tons and tons of players who are sick all the time. So I think the Houston Outlaws are better than what we have seen from them. I truly believe that. But I just think at the end of the day, they have one big problem, and it is that their players are almost always sick. And I think that's really what they're running into right now. And I'm excited to see, or interested in seeing what they're like when they don't have that problem hanging over their heads, when they can actually have players who are not sick and can actually just play. So we'll see what happens when that happens, but I don't have the faith in the Outlaws right now to pick them over anybody. Moving on to Sunday, we have the Boston Uprising taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. Obviously, big first win for the Boston Uprising last weekend. I don't think it matters. I think they're going to get completely steamrolled by the Fusion, because I don't think the Boston Uprising are that good still, and I think the Fusion are that good. So I think it's going to be a pretty one-sided match there, just based on everything that I have seen so far. The Fusion are playing, I think, the best they've ever played. Some people might argue that playoffs season 1 Fusion was better than this Fusion team, but I don't even think that's the case. I think this Fusion roster is really, really good. I think they are decisive. They're talented. When you have a team that can bench Fury, arguably one of the best main tanks in the flex tanks in the world, you can just bench him and still dominate. That says a lot. I'm excited to see Fury get to finally play for the Fusion. I don't know why he isn't playing yet. Might just be that they have more faith in Poco. I don't really know, but I'm excited to see when Fury actually does play how this team looks. But this is a really good team, and I'm excited to see what they do going forward, because I think that they have so much talent on this roster that they're going to be a force to watch going forward. Next, the Paris Eternal taking on the Atlanta Reign. This should be a pretty good match, I think. The Paris Eternal have been very, very good. I've actually been very impressed with the Paris Eternal so far this season. They have obviously that one loss under the belts of Toronto, but Toronto, I think, is a lot better than people give them credit for. But the Paris Eternal have looked really good. They've been very talented so far. Players that I didn't know would be as good as they are, like FD God, and even Ben Best, who I had basically written off, has been a lot better than I expected. But really, it's of course XZ and Hanbin who really are doing the dangerous, really doing the good work, and really kind of dominating, which is definitely something to note, which is what people were kind of expecting. So I think they're looking really good, but they got to play the Atlanta Reign, right? The Atlanta Reign haven't played in a while. They do not want to disappoint their fans. And I think the Atlanta Reign have a really, really, really stacked roster. I think that they are going to win this match. I think it'll be pretty close, but I think they're going to win this match. But I'm excited, regardless, to see what it's like, because I think it's going to be very fun and entertaining, and I'm all in for the ride. For my big pick game this week, it is the London Spitfire taking on the Florida Mayhem. And the reason why this is my big pick game is because I looked at this match and I was picking, and it was the only game that made me actually pause and think about who I really thought would win this match. All these other matches, I was pretty set on who I was going to pick. I thought like it was pretty obvious that New York would beat Florida, Atlanta would beat Toronto, London would beat Houston, etc., etc. But this match, I had to really like stop and think and go, well, the Mayhem are pretty good, but the Spitfire are looking a lot better, and I had to really think about it. But I'm picking the Mayhem because I have seen more from them so far, and I think that what we've seen from them versus what we've seen from London gives me a little more faith in the Mayhem. The Mayhem, of course, were pretty dominant in their win against the Houston Outlaws. Now, granted, it's the Houston Outlaws, so take away from that what you will. But they got completely destroyed by the Philadelphia Fusion. So you go, okay, well, if that's what happens to them, well, then that's a little hard to tell what's going on. You know, they're able to beat someone at the bottom, lose someone at the top. London looked okay against New York, looked pretty weak against Paris, and then managed to pull out a win over Washington. So I just kind of look at those two things, or those three things, and it's, to me, not really a positive enough interaction or positive enough, what's the word I'm trying to think? I don't even know. I didn't get left with a positive enough reaction to what they've done so far to feel like they have the advantage over Florida. But I think it's a very close match. I think this match could go either way. But I like what the Florida Mayhem have done. I like what I've seen from them so far. I think they've played pretty well so far. I think they made a lot of questionable decisions when they played Philly, like players that they started that they probably shouldn't have started, and stuff like that. But I think that this is a better Mayhem roster than, of course, we've ever seen, and I really like what they've done so far. And I know I've said that like a million times. So I'm picking them over London. That's all I'm going to say. Final match for the homestand is the Toronto Defiant taking on the Houston Outlaws. This, to me, easy pick, Toronto Defiant. I don't have confidence in the Houston Outlaws right now. The Toronto Defiant are my dark horse team right now. I think that people have been sleeping on them all preseason and all offseason. I think they built a very good roster. They built an incredibly talented roster, and I think that this is a team who really will surprise a lot of people. They beat Paris somewhat convincingly. Now, that Paris team is not as good as the Paris team we have now, because that was when they were playing with Ben Best and No Smite in the double main tank. They weren't playing a flex tank at the time. I think they're much better now with the flex tank, with Han Bin in. But they also played very, very, very close against the Philadelphia Fusion. They almost reverse swept the Philadelphia Fusion. So I have confidence in the Toronto Defiant right now. I think this is a match that they will win. I think they'll win it somewhat convincingly over a team that is not that strong in Houston Outlaws. But it's also a very, very, very huge match with the Outlaws, because they need to get a win at some point this weekend to try to salvage what has happened to them so far this season. Because if you're starting 0-5, that is not a great position to get into. Granted, there's 28 games this season, and if you go 0-5 and somehow manage to win the next 23 games, you'll probably be the number one team in the standings. I don't see that happening, but it could, I guess, in theory. But you don't want to start 0-5, because that's going to be a problem for you as a team, and you do not want that hanging over your head, being the team that started 0-5. They're on a huge match losing streak already. They have to be able to turn it around, and I think that they have a lot of issues they need to sort out that they just haven't done. I think that they have roster problems that they don't really want to address. I think that they have a need for at least a second main tank player who can at least challenge Muma. I think it's the kind of thing where, you need another player who will be able to work alongside this player, but also a player who you can have and potentially challenge your starting main tank. Because you have a player who doesn't feel pressure from other players on the roster to kind of earn their spot. I think there's always a level of kind of like staticness, I guess, that comes. Like, if you don't feel like you're going to be challenged, you don't get the same level of competitiveness out of some of these players. And I think Moom is a fantastic competitor anyway, but I think you need to have at least another main tank so that you have options in general, and then you have more of a competition in the position that just breeds better players and better play in general. But that's just my opinion on that. Overall, this is an interesting homestand. I think there's a lot of great matches this time around. I'm excited to see what we get out of all of them, but I'd love to hear what your opinions are in the comments down below, as always. And if you've enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing, as it helps out a ton with the channel. But that is everything that I have for you today. So thank you for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.